Inside ADX Florence, the prison built to erase identity. The Silent Fortress. There is a prison in the United States where silence is not just common, it is engineered. Built far from major cities, surrounded by open land and mountains, this facility was designed with a single purpose: to contain people the federal government considers impossible to manage anywhere else. This is ADX Florence. Officially known as the United States Penitentiary, Administrative Maximum Facility, it is the most restrictive prison in the federal system. Inmates here spend the vast majority of their lives alone, in cells built to limit sound, sight, and human contact. Former wardens, federal officials, and court records describe it not as a place of rehabilitation, but as a place of control. ADX Florence is often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But that comparison understates the reality. Alcatraz was loud. ADX Florence was built to erase noise, and, according to critics, identity itself. This is the story of the prison built to disappear people. If you value fully factual, deeply researched prison documentaries, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Inmate Diaries. Your support helps us continue sharing accurate, responsible stories from behind the walls. Why ADX Florence exists. ADX Florence did not emerge from fear, it emerged from failure. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the U.S. federal prison system was struggling to control a small number of inmates who continued to commit violent acts inside maximum security prisons. These individuals assaulted staff, murdered fellow inmates, coordinated criminal activity, and in some cases, attempted to escape repeatedly, even from the most secure federal facilities available at the time. One prison became central to this crisis, USP Marion in Illinois. In 1983, 2 federal correctional officers were murdered by inmates at Marion in separate incidents on the same day. Following those killings, the prison entered a permanent lockdown. That lockdown, 23 hours a day in cells, became the blueprint for something far more permanent. Federal authorities concluded that no existing facility was sufficient to contain the most violent, disruptive, or ideologically extreme prisoners in their custody. The solution was not reform. It was isolation. Designing a prison for total control. Construction on ADX Florence began in the early 1990s. From the beginning, the design philosophy was explicit: control every variable of human interaction. Cells were built from poured concrete, walls, floors, ceilings, and furniture molded as a single structure. Beds, desks, and stools are fixed into the concrete. Doors are solid steel. Each cell includes a narrow window, positioned so inmates can see the sky, but not the surrounding landscape, nearby buildings, or other people. According to Bureau of Prisons documentation, the design reduces the ability to communicate, pass objects, or coordinate behavior between cells. Sound does not travel easily. Movement is strictly scheduled. Human contact is minimized. Most inmates at ADX Florence are confined to their cells approximately 22 to 23 hours per day. Meals are delivered through a slot in the door. Recreation, when permitted, often takes place alone, in a small outdoor concrete enclosure sometimes described in court filings as a recreation pen. This structure was not accidental. It was intentional. Who gets sent here? ADX Florence does not house the largest prison population. It houses the most controlled one. Inmates are assigned here through a federal classification process based on behavior, security risk, and, in some cases, national security concerns. Those held at ADX Florence have included individuals convicted of terrorism-related offenses, prisoners who committed serious violence while incarcerated elsewhere, high-ranking organized crime figures, inmates deemed extreme escape risks. Not everyone sent to ADX remains there permanently. Some are transferred after years of clear conduct. Others remain for decades. According to court records, placement decisions are administrative, not judicial. Meaning judges do not sentence people directly to ADX Florence. The Bureau of Prisons determines placement internally. This process has been challenged repeatedly in federal courts. Some challenges succeeded. Many did not. The beginning of a controversy. From its earliest years, ADX Florence became the subject of intense legal scrutiny. Civil rights attorneys, psychologists, and human rights organizations argued that extended solitary confinement causes severe psychological harm, particularly when imposed for years or decades. The federal government disputed that characterization. Officials described ADX Florence as necessary, lawful, and carefully monitored, pointing to internal reviews and mental health services provided within the facility. What is clear, and documented, is that ADX Florence became one of the most litigated prisons in the United States. Inmates filed lawsuits alleging psychological deterioration, inadequate mental health care, excessive isolation, lack of meaningful review for continued confinement. Some courts ruled in favor of limited reforms. Others upheld the Bureau of Prisons' authority. The debate over ADX Florence was no longer theoretical. It was legal, medical, and moral. Life inside a concrete box. A day without variation. At ADX Florence, the day does not unfold. It repeats. According to Bureau of Prisons records, court filings, and sworn testimony from former inmates, daily life inside an ADX cell follows a rigid, nearly unchanging structure. Most inmates are confined to single-person cells measuring approximately 7 by 12 feet. The cell contains a concrete bed, a concrete desk and stool, a stainless steel sink and toilet unit, a narrow window facing the sky. There is no direct line of sight to other prisoners. Meals are delivered through a slot in the door. Inmates eat alone. Conversation with staff is minimal and functional. Lights are controlled externally. Temperature is regulated centrally. Movement occurs only when authorized, and usually while restrained. For many inmates, days pass without any face-to-face human interaction. This is not an unofficial description. It is acknowledged in federal court records. Recreation in isolation. Federal policy requires that inmates be offered recreation time. At ADX Florence, recreation does not resemble a yard. Inmates typically receive up to 5 hours of recreation per week, though this can vary by behavior level and security status. Recreation usually occurs alone, inside a small concrete enclosure with high walls and an open top. There is no grass. No shared space. No interaction with other inmates. Some enclosures include a stationary exercise bar. Others include nothing. Court documents describe these areas as outdoor but isolating, designed to prevent communication while meeting minimum constitutional requirements. Weather conditions, snow, extreme cold, or high winds, may limit access. For many inmates, this enclosure is the only time they leave their cell. Communication, controlled and filtered. Communication from ADX Florence is strictly regulated. Phone calls, when permitted, are monitored and limited. Mail is screened. Visits occur behind barriers, often through glass or video systems. Some inmates are placed under special administrative measures, known as SAMs. SAMs impose additional restrictions on communication when the government determines that an inmate's contact with the outside world could pose a serious threat to national security or public safety. Under SAMs, all mail may be reviewed or restricted. Phone calls are severely limited or prohibited. Legal communications may be monitored under court-approved procedures. SAMs are authorized by the U.S. Attorney General and reviewed periodically, though critics argue the reviews lack transparency. Not all ADX inmates are under SAMs. But for those who are, isolation extends beyond the cell. Mental health care, documented and disputed. The federal government maintains that ADX Florence provides mental health services consistent with constitutional standards. Records show the presence of psychologists, psychiatric evaluations, medication management, crisis intervention protocols. However, numerous lawsuits allege that the environment itself undermines treatment. Psychiatrists who testified in federal cases described symptoms observed among long-term ADX inmates, including severe anxiety, depression, hallucinations, cognitive decline, difficulty reintegrating into social environments. In a 2012 settlement, the Bureau of Prisons agreed to transfer some inmates with serious mental illness out of ADX Florence and revise mental health screening procedures. The settlement did not declare ADX unconstitutional, but it acknowledged systemic concerns. Time without landmarks. Time functions differently in extreme isolation. Without social interaction, varied activity, or environmental change, days lose distinction. Former inmates have described difficulty remembering dates, seasons, or the passage of years. This phenomenon, sometimes referred to in academic literature as temporal disorientation, is not unique to ADX Florence. But the duration of confinement here makes it exceptional. Some inmates have spent 10, 20, or more years under ADX conditions. Federal officials state that inmates can earn transfers to less restrictive units through good behavior. Critics argue the process is slow, opaque, and inconsistently applied. The record shows both claims have factual support. The people the system could not contain. Notorious, but not exceptional. ADX Florence is often described through the lens of notoriety. The public tends to focus on who is held there, rather than why the facility exists. Over the years, inmates at ADX Florence have included individuals convicted of terrorism, espionage, mass violence, and organized crime leadership. Their names appear frequently in media coverage. But Bureau of Prisons records emphasize a different point: notoriety alone is not the qualifying factor. ADX Florence was designed to manage behavior, not fame. Inmates are assigned based on documented conduct, escape risk, and the ability, or inability, of other institutions to safely house them. Many prisoners at ADX Florence are not publicly known. They are rarely discussed. And they often remain there for years without media attention. This is one of the facility's defining characteristics. Terrorism cases and national security. A significant portion of ADX Florence's population has been connected to terrorism-related convictions. Federal prosecutors have argued in court filings that ADX Florence provides the highest level of containment available for inmates whose communication or influence could pose an ongoing threat. Some of these inmates are placed under special administrative measures. The government's position, supported in multiple rulings, is that communication itself can be weaponized, used to direct violence, inspire attacks, or coordinate external networks. Defense attorneys and civil liberties organizations dispute the breadth and duration of these restrictions. What is not disputed is that ADX Florence became the central holding facility for high-risk national security inmates after the 1990s. This role significantly shaped its operational culture. Organized crime and internal violence. Another category of inmates housed at ADX Florence includes leaders of organized criminal groups. Court documents show that some were transferred after continuing to order assaults, murders, or drug operations from inside other federal prisons. In these cases, the Bureau of Prisons argued that traditional maximum security facilities failed to neutralize command influence. ADX Florence's isolation model was intended to sever those connections. Whether it succeeds fully is debated. But records confirm that several inmates experienced a significant reduction in external communication after transfer. This outcome has been cited repeatedly by federal officials in court defenses of the facility. Escape risks and system failures. Escape history also plays a role. Some inmates sent to ADX Florence had previously attempted escape from other institutions, or assisted others in doing so. Others exploited weaknesses in staff routines, communication systems, or facility layouts. ADX Florence was designed to remove opportunity. Cells are monitored. Movement is calculated. Contact is minimized. According to Bureau of Prisons assessments, no successful escape from ADX Florence has been documented since its opening. This claim is widely cited and uncontested in public records. Step-down, pathway or illusion. Federal officials emphasize that ADX Florence is not always a permanent destination. The Bureau of Prisons operates a step-down program, intended to allow inmates to earn transfer to less restrictive environments through sustained compliance. The program includes gradual increases in out-of-cell time, limited group interaction under supervision, behavioral assessments over multiple years. Some inmates have successfully completed the process and transferred to other high-security prisons. Others have not. Critics argue that criteria for advancement are vague and progress is slow. Officials respond that security considerations must override speed. Court records confirm both outcomes exist. The courts, the cost, and the question that remains. The Constitution on trial. ADX Florence has been challenged in court almost since the day it opened. The central legal question has never been whether the prison is harsh. That point is uncontested. The question has been whether its conditions violate the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, and the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees due process. In multiple federal lawsuits, inmates argued that long-term isolation at ADX Florence causes serious psychological harm and that placement decisions lack sufficient procedural safeguards. The federal government responded consistently. ADX Florence is extreme because the risks are extreme. Courts, for the most part, agreed. While judges acknowledged the severity of ADX conditions, they repeatedly ruled that security concerns outweighed constitutional violations, provided minimum standards of care were met. This legal pattern shaped the future of the prison. A rare settlement, not a shutdown. In 2012, a major lawsuit led to one of the most significant changes in ADX Florence's history. The case focused on inmates with serious mental illness housed under ADX conditions. Rather than proceeding to trial, the Bureau of Prisons entered into a settlement agreement. Under the settlement, the government agreed to improve mental health screening, transfer inmates with severe mental illness to appropriate facilities, modify certain housing and monitoring practices. The settlement did not declare ADX Florence unconstitutional. It did not dismantle the facility. But it confirmed, in official record, that isolation at this level carries risks requiring mitigation. ADX Florence remained operational, largely unchanged in structure, but adjusted in oversight. International criticism. ADX Florence has drawn criticism beyond U.S. borders. United Nations human rights experts and international organizations have raised concerns about prolonged solitary confinement, describing it as potentially incompatible with international human rights standards when used long-term. U.S. officials rejected binding authority from these assessments, stating that international opinions do not override domestic law or federal court rulings. No international body has legal jurisdiction over ADX Florence. But the criticism remains part of the historical record. Does ADX work? By the metrics the federal government values most, ADX Florence has succeeded. There have been no documented escapes, no large-scale riots, no confirmed external coordination from within the facility at scale. Violence inside ADX Florence is rare compared to other maximum security prisons. At the same time, the human cost remains debated. Psychological impact. Years of isolation. Reintegration challenges. The public record supports both conclusions. ADX Florence is effective. ADX Florence is severe. Both statements are true. A prison built to erase identity? ADX Florence was not built to punish in the traditional sense. It was built to neutralize. To remove influence. To limit identity to a number, a routine, a cell. Supporters argue it is a necessary tool for an unmanageable minority of inmates. Critics argue it strips away something fundamental. What ADX Florence represents is not just a prison, but a boundary. A line the U.S. system crossed in the name of security. Whether that line was justified remains an open question. One the courts have largely answered. And one the public continues to debate. If you found this documentary valuable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the Inmate Diaries. Your support allows us to keep producing fully factual, deeply researched stories from inside the world's most secretive prisons. Thank you for watching.